Hey, fam. We are back in the network studios with another fantastic guest. And that means if you're currently listening on your favorite podcast platform, you should also head over to our YouTube at Femme Regard Productions to see the fabulous video footage that we're getting today. Like I said, we have a fantastic guest. Carolina will introduce him in just a moment. But I want to remind you, we oftentimes have video on YouTube. It's not every episode. Sometimes it's just if it's a special guest or whatever the case may be. So don't forget to subscribe because that's how you're going to see all of that.
Yes. And we are honored to have been contacted by Ken Lee from Michael Weiss Productions for the very special guest we have on the show today. This award-winning television director is Dan Attias. And he is here to also talk to us today about his new book, Directing Great Television, Inside TV's New Golden Age. And we're very excited about it.
Yes. And as always, of course, we're going to have a little special segment for you Patreon subscribers at the very end.
Oh, yeah.
So if you don't know what that means, basically you can go to patreon.com/FemmeRegard and subscribe, I guess is the right word, to us for $5 a month or higher tiers if you want to get some extra cool prizes. But $5 will get you exclusive footage, behind the scenes footage, all that kind of stuff every single month.
Yes. So without further ado, we're in the studio live with Dan. Hello. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here with you.
We are delighted to have you here.
So we love these in-guest sessions. It's always a treat for us, and we hope the guest too. You know, how have you been doing since the pandemic? Are you back full-time in studios?
Yeah, it's, I took about a year off. It was funny. I was in the middle of last March of 2020. I was in the middle of prepping an episode of the show Billions in New York. And 2 days into my prep, the pandemic hit, everything shut down. I flew back to Los Angeles. And it was a year to the day, pretty much, that I flew back to New York to do the last 2 episodes of season 5 of Billions. Oh my goodness. But in that year, one of the great benefits was that it gave me a chance to finish my book, Directing Great Television. And so that was nice to just have that direct kind of
focus on it.
Yeah. So I had something that I cared about to work on. And now pretty much, I am back to, I did 3 episodes for Billions, and but now I'm kind of trying to promote the book, but I am very open to full-time work.
Love that. Yeah. I know we were super excited when because Ken has been sending us a few people since he's the publisher, so he's promoting his books and his authors, and I saw the name of the book and I didn't see your name yet. And I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. This sounds like a book we would want to read anyway. And then I realized who you were and I was like, okay, this is a great opportunity. Because just the experiences you've had and how long you've been doing it and the end products that you've made, or especially right now with the new movie coming out, the buzz for The Sopranos is like, back in full swing. But it's just really awesome to get to talk to you today. And I'm excited to hear all of the things that you've learned throughout your career, and what keeps you going and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's like exactly what I was going to say. Reading your book, I really enjoyed to the point you said the experiences you had because they were great anecdotes for someone who isn't an experienced filmmaker, director for TV or for film. If you are experienced, I think you will learn a lot from this book because of the anecdotes and the experience you've had shared along the way. And you're just very humble, and you speak about the tough times and how you've worked around it. And it's just really inspiring to hear because they're situations that we can all find ourselves in one way or another when it comes to directing.
I really wanted to demystify the process, not pretend to absolute knowledge and I always knew how I was going to do it. Every project is unique, and you really have to approach every project, I find, kind of with beginner's mind, just I don't know how to do this.
Yes.
And then it's, to me, the most interesting thing is really, I love directing so much because it's really where I can be most present with myself and really engage with the story, determine what the story is that wants to be told, what about it grabs me personally. And to do that well, I think you really have to be really open and honest with yourself about who you are, what you care about. And that's what I love so much about doing it. It's a process of discovery and it can lead to very exciting outcomes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that because it kind of goes back to some writers that we've talked to that, they always say, why am I the one to tell this story? But that applies to directing too, because everyone has different opinions on things and life experiences and stuff. And you're going to bring that, we think of like the writer is like the only one that's like creating the story, but that's obviously not the case. As a director, you're guiding it all. So you're bringing that to the set as well and to the finished product. So yeah, I think that's important to look at it that way.
That's a really interesting point you make, because I think it's a common misconception, and what I hope the book kind of helps to address is, the story is an ever evolving thing. And it's especially in film of any kind. And I think directing series television has so much more in common with directing features or directing anything than it has differences. But there are significant differences, which maybe we'll get into.
Yeah.
But the main thing is that this process for film or television is a highly collaborative process. It's like there's no such thing as go filming the script. Filming the script, what that would really be is just pictures of words on a page. It has to be translated. It has to be interpreted. It has to be made to come alive. And that, of course, involves input from actors, from all the technical crew, from how the director of photography sees it. But the key thing about directing, which I so love about it, is really when you are directing, regardless of whether or not you wrote it, which in series television I haven't, you have to take responsibility as being the storyteller. Now, in series television, it's an interesting challenge because you also have to serve the vision of the showrunner. But unless you find something you care about in the telling of the story, I don't think there's much chance for me to make someone else care very much about it. I have to care about it. I have to be invested in it.
Almost more. So.
Yeah. And I have to also be open to discovery, because I think without discovery in the moment, it just becomes, people sense when something's not alive. And you sense when you're watching something when something is really happening. Yeah. Well, I mean, you can want something to happen. You can say it happens. You can give a bunch of reasons why it happened. But unless you have the real sense of watching it happen, that's none of that other stuff matters. So the director really has to kind of monitor that moment to moment. What story is getting told? What am I interested in? Am I caring about this moment? And when one's attention lapses, that's where the work has to be done. But there's so much getting into it first in the prep period to first understand what story are we telling. That's something people tend not to really kind of think about. They watch something, oh, that's the story. The writers wrote the story. It's not that simple. You have to find what is below the surface of the events. What is the meaning of what's happening?
The subtext of everything that's happening.
And as the director, just as actors can bring this too, it's like there's nothing I love more than watching an actor just kind of bring some new awareness into the telling. But if they're not doing that, I have to assist them in that. And if I sense there's something more to explore, I have to be the one to encourage them, help them find it. And it's really only the director who's making those moment-to-moment decisions when it's right.
Yeah. And I love that. I mean, we're both actors first. That's how we got started. And personally, as an actor, I love being directed. Like, I love when a director has specific thoughts and ideas, even if they're like told to me in a very vague way, just having that feedback, having guidance, something to point me in a different direction or make me think of something that I didn't think of before. So, yeah.
One of probably the best training I got as a director was the 3 years I spent trying to be an actor, which I did that shortly after college. And I loved that process, although I felt I was really getting in my own way more than I liked. I was a little too much in my head, and I could be distracted easily. It wasn't until I really found directing that when I could sit behind the camera and watch others be more personally on the line in a certain way. And it's such a joy for me when I work with actors who are trained, who have perhaps a more fluid, open channel to what kind of arising in the moment. But there's so much to, it's such an intimate process. It should be, I think, directing. And you really need to develop trust with the actors. And I think above all, the actors have to feel seen and have someone with them, because everybody needs guidance. We're all kind of finding our way. And I feel that way too as a director. And that's an interesting thing I have to kind of toggle back between.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, on the one hand, I need to develop my vision for what the story is we're being told. And I need to, ensure the actors that, they're there. I'm watching, I'm with them. And whether their choices help or detract or distract from the story we're telling, but there needs to be a connection. And I find, I love that intimacy when I'm connecting to an actor and we're trying to find something together, and maybe I see something that triggers something in him or her.
Mhm.
And I think the worst thing, and I knew this from my own experience, is acting was, when you're just abandoned, when you just feel you're acting in a vacuum, like you just described. It's a
Mm-hmm.
terrible feeling.
Yeah.
So that, for example, whenever I want to give an adjustment to an actor, one of the things I always try to do is to first recognize what they were trying, that I saw what they were trying to do. Instead of just coming in, no, not that, do this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a terrible way to work, because you're devaluing the actor. The actor has likely given a lot of thought to what they've tried to do,
Right.
and it doesn't make them right and you right or wrong.
Right.
It's just their choice, and you have a different take on it. And so my experience in working with actors, and I have a whole chapter on
He
in the
does.
book.
It's really good.
Yeah,
He gave someone direction, and that's what they wanted the whole time. They wanted, I think you were the first person to actually give them.
Yeah, well, this was
like,
this was a very famous actor who I don't name in the book, not because I think he would mind too much, but the story was just that I took the job mainly to work with this particular actor, and
yeah.
and I so looked forward to it, and he was kind of an intimidating presence. And I try always, to the point you made earlier, I try always to introduce myself to the actors before we show up on the set. So in my prep period, I mean, that's one of the challenges of series television directing. You have a really short period and you just jump in and you're directing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always try to avoid, if I can, meeting the actors for the first time on the day I'm about to
It's really hard
tell
to
them how to play their character.
Right.
So I had made an attempt to introduce myself to this man, and he was very cool and reserved, and I just had the feeling he was just looking right through me and everything I was saying. That feeling you get when it's like, oh, this isn't going well.
Yeah, it's just like,
and I walked
okay.
away thinking, it's like, what did I say? Did I say that? Oh, it was so stupid.
Right.
He must think, all those kind of things. But I had broken the ice, and we get to the first day, and I'm looking forward to this particular scene, because I just know, I have a sense of what it should be, and I think he's going to just kill it. And we rehearse it, and it's boring and insipid. And I'm looking at that, and I think, okay, already I'm assuming he probably doesn't like me. Secondly,
Yeah.
he's got, awards up the whatever, and he's, it's like, and I'm going to come and tell him, no. So I think, well, it's just a rehearsal. We're just setting the cameras. Maybe he's saving it. And
because he's like known to really bring out like a strong performance.
he can leave scorched earth in many of his performances.
Love it.
And he goes away, we light, we come back, and we do the first take, and I'm kind of mortified to see he's doing it the same way. And it wasn't telling the story, and it wasn't the intention I thought the character had. And the worst thing, it was boring. It was just my intention. See, that's the other thing I'll share with you now, kind of another big theme in my book, is the main question, I think, as a director, for me to ask myself always, and I encourage anyone directing, is how does this make me feel? All I have is myself, really. And that's all any of us really have. I mean, we can benefit from study and, get whatever, information we can about how other people handled similar situations. But ultimately, how it affects me, I have to assume that's how it's going to affect the audience. And that's the only barometer I have, if it's good or not. Did I think it was good? It's like, I can't please someone else's standards. I can only please mine. So when I see something is boring or not working, or my attention is wavering, that's where I know, okay, that's where we need more work. But here I am now with this situation. The first scene I'm doing with this guy, and it's horrible. And we're already lit. And, and so I have to think, how can I approach him? And without going into all the details, I go into more details in the book about this particular story. But I came up to him and I said, he was talking to somebody under his command, and he references how when they had first met, he really didn't really care for him. In fact, he really disliked him intensely, but he tolerated him because he thought maybe there could be some mutual self-interest. And over the years, it had gone fine. But now, in the scene he's approaching, this guy, he needs him to do something to accomplish something which he's failing at. So he's trying to tell him it would be great if you could succeed at this.
Mhm.
And he played it just kind of flatly, like took all the lines literally, you know.
Yeah.
He was very genteel and all that. So I just said, what can I say to this guy that's, you know, and that's actable, because that's another thing. What's a good intention? So I just said to him, you know, and I see how what your choice here. I wonder if you could think about it a little differently. I wonder if the contempt you describe having felt for him when you first met him, I wonder if you could enter the scene feeling exactly the same thing. And he just looked at me and he said, very well. He didn't say, great note, or you're full of it. He just said, very well. And
really cool. It makes me feel really great.
We roll again, and he comes in, and suddenly there's just a chill in the room. He's terrifying because he's looking at the guy, and the subtext became, which he made sense of, which is what I had hoped he would. He's like, you know, I never liked you. I never liked you. And, you know, so long as it was fine and you were helping me and all that, I tolerated you. But the minute it's no longer, you're not really producing the goods, I would sooner kill you as look at you. So his little request that he work harder to solve the problem had a lot more teeth in it. And it was great. So I'm watching it. This is great. But I had no idea what he felt about it. So I go on and, you know, direct the next several scenes and whatever. And a couple days later, I take my laundry into the wardrobe trailer to throw it in the clothes washers, and the wardrobe supervisor is there, and she comes over and says, hey, I call him Max in the book. That's not his name. Max really likes working with you. And I say, oh, that's nice to hear. I mean, he hadn't said a word to me, but that's nice to hear. And she said, yeah, he said you're the first director to give him a note. And that was a great lesson for me because, you know, it's like people were intimidated by him. You know, and he's, you know, rarely needs a note. He's, you know, brilliant, but sometimes he does. And, you know, there's nothing above your pay grade as director. You have to take responsibility for everything. You have to work through those kind of excruciating moments. Yeah. And the way through it, I think, is to realize you have to serve the story. You're the storyteller. Yeah. If you let something go, if you let something be less good because of whatever reason, that's on you.
And it's a difference between serving one's ego versus the story.
Absolutely.
So it's like the way you approach it, if it's about the story itself, it will never come across as, oh, like I just know better, you know, because that's the line, you know, where it becomes serving the ego versus the story.
I mean, one thing I believe too, and I mentioned it as well in the book, is when you direct, you also always have to be both storyteller and holding the vision, but you also have to be part audience at the same time. You have to know, how is this landing? And so that you have to put yourself, and I have to put myself in the position like, I know all about the story, but I'm going to pretend I don't know anything other than what I'm seeing and what I saw in the previous two scenes, is say the third scene. I don't, you know, it's like, that's something I also think is often an unacknowledged requirement, responsibility to do effective storytelling, is you have to establish context, because if you don't establish context, a performance might, an actor might, you know, act incredibly beautifully on something, but if you don't know what's at stake, if you don't know where they came from, if you're not just within their character, but in terms of the story, if you don't know what his or her situation was leading up to it, you follow it. Oh, that's interesting, but you don't get the full emotional impact. So the director, the storyteller, has to acquaint the audience with everything, subtle things. It does not necessarily things hit over their head with, but just what's the feeling in this room right now that she is saying these lines? Where are these other characters that she's being so bold as to say something in front of them? What are their issues? Because if you don't know that, she's just an actor saying lines. But if you know, oh my God, she's saying it in the presence of someone who just, you know, did something, you know, so it's a beautiful, beautiful, complex art. And, you know, another reason I loved writing the book, I hoped that it's going to appeal not just to directors and actors, but just fans of TV, to kind of take them inside, I tell the book is really not a how-to book. It's really sharing a lot of my experiences.
But I think that's the most
I try
best
to
way to learn.
Thank you. I just try to put people in my chair and I say, well, this is what the challenge was, and this is what happened, and the actor made this choice, or the cameraman made this observation, or I wasn't happy with the writing about this, so how do I solve it? And I just tried to take people through steps. So I hope people kind of are just fans of TV will find it interesting. I hope.
Oh yeah, it's a bunch of great stories either way. So I totally agree. And I love that you started with some acting classes in your background and studying that. And then, if I recall correctly, you went on to AD for directors like Francis Coppola.
Right. After I
AD is assistant directing if you're not in the film. No.
Yeah. After I it fell to me, I came to directing late. I was in my mid-20s. How late is that? But, I didn't know what I really wanted to do. I was an English major. I got into law school. I didn't want to do that. I started acting to kind of free myself, fell in love with that, But I wound up at UCLA Film School in an MFA program, film directing, and I didn't really have a thesis film I wanted to make. And I didn't want to be a career film student and just hang out there forever. And I thought, well, how can I, until I kind of have the film I want to make, I thought maybe it would be useful to become an assistant director, not really knowing what an assistant director did, thinking, oh, you assist in the directing.
Yes, that's exactly how I thought it was at first.
And you
so
don't.
I understand.
The problem with directing of any
that.
kind is you get thrown into the deep end first time. It's like you can't, like for, directing an episode of a series, it's like you don't get to direct a little on one episode and then kind of work your way up to, okay, I'll take the whole episode. No, you go from having none of the responsibility to having all of the responsibility. So it's a real interesting challenge. But I thought, well, I'll try to work as an assistant director, and I was fortunate to get into a program that the Directors Guild of America runs called the DGA Assistant Directors Training Program. And they put you on jobs for 400 days. It's like whatever. If you work continuously, as I was fortunate to do, it's like a year and a half.
Did you have to be still in school to be part of that program?
No, it's a very difficult program to get into. They interview you, take tests and all that. So I was fortunate to get in.
That's amazing.
But then they assign you to things. And then after you get in the requisite days, 400 for me then you get a guild card and became a second assistant director, what's called. So I did the trainee job and second assistant director job for like 2 years each, a total of like 4 years. And I was fortunate to work on some amazing projects. As a trainee assistant director, I worked on Airplane, the original Airplane, which was unbelievably fun.
Yeah,
and as a second assistant director, I worked for Steven Spielberg on E.T., the extraterrestrial.
Oh, wow.
And on Francis Coppola's movie One from the Heart. I also worked for a very famous old school director named Sam Fuller, who did a lot of films in the 40s and 50s. This is, I think, his last film I worked on for him. And with George Miller, who did Mad Max. I didn't work on Mad Max, but I worked on some other things. So I had a great experience, learning about set operations, learning about filmmaking, but not so much from the creative side, more kind of the
operational.
Correct. And that gave me great training. And I also got to see some great directors at work. Now, I will say, and this is advice for anyone who may want to direct and gets the opportunity to maybe shadow or watch someone, I didn't do something I really wish I had done, and I tell anybody who shadows me now to do it, which is I didn't try to figure out how I would direct particular scenes before I saw how Coppola or Spielberg or Wim Wenders did it. And it's like, because you don't really know the problems. It's like the audience. It's like I expect reading the books. People watch a show and say, oh, that's that show. But you don't realize how many infinite choices go in, and decisions have to be made, and how am I going to stage the actors, and where am I going to put the camera, and what's the critical, how come that...
I have questions for you on all of that. They're coming.
Because it's like, boy, the camera was just in the right position at that moment when she had that revelation, and there was that behind her and this, that. How did that just happen? Well, it didn't just happen. It's like all of those things are decisions you have to make, and you have to figure it out mostly in prep, and then you have to be better prepared you are, the more open you are to suggestions and more flexible I find you can be on the set. So, that all of that gave me a greater understanding of that stuff.
Yeah.
So here you are working on these amazing film sets.
Mhm.
How did, okay, you didn't want to become a film director after that? Like, I was so stunned.
So how did I, after watching the process, still want to be a director? Is that what you said?
Wanting to be not a film director.
Oh, get into
and
television.
getting into television.
That is an interesting journey. Because after I'd done this work as an assistant director, I could have moved up to what's called first assistant director. And I knew I didn't want to be an assistant director. I wanted to direct. So I went back to UCLA. I did then have a film I wanted to make that could be my thesis film. And I made a short half-hour dramatic comedy. It's funny, I'd just finished doing E.T. the previous winter. And in my short film, Drew Barrymore, who was just 6, was actually in it. She was in it. I filmed it in February of '82. It was before E.T. got released in May. So she was in it, and it was, I thought, a really nice little film. Won a bunch of film festivals, got me my master's, but it also put me on the map, kind of. I got an agent out of it, and I got hired.
So you guys, short films?
Yeah.
They still do.
And probably many of the same festivals you guys are taking yours to. I mean, I went to Telluride, and there's a lot of San Francisco, won the San Francisco and the Chicago film festivals and all
That's
that.
amazing.
But it got me an agent, and an agent who was known for finding good young directors. And Dino De Laurentiis, a famous producer, had a Stephen King horror film he wanted to make, and he wanted to do it for a price, meaning didn't want to pay the director very much.
Yeah.
So he went to this particular agent who had some, good young directors by reputation, and I wound up getting hired for that. So my first job was Stephen King's Silver Bullet, came out in '85.
Wow.
And it was a great experience, difficult, challenge.
As a director,
yeah.
Okay.
But horror films were not my thing. I did my best with it, and I think it did fine. But I was offered more horror films. I didn't want to do that. And
because it is a very specific.
I was going to say they pigeonhole you real quick.
Yeah. Well, as you'll know from, I'm sure, acting experience, that is a hard thing to break out of. Whatever you do well, people want no risk. Yeah. They say, okay, let's get that person, because actors have that trouble all the time. They do a great performance as like a psycho killer, and they say, oh, they're great as psycho killers. That's the only thing they can do. So it's very frustrating. And when I started my television directing work, I'll get back to that other question in a second. But I did a lot of what were considered dramas. I did, in those days, David Kelly had a lot of shows. He's still making great shows, but he had Ally McBeal and The Practice and some others. I did a show I loved called Northern Exposure, but even that was considered drama because it was an hour-long single camera. It was just the category for the Emmys was drama. So I wasn't really considered for comedies, even though The Sopranos was, I thought, hilarious, and Northern Exposure. Until
subjectively more so a comedy.
Yeah.
A dark comedy.
Dark comedy.
Yeah.
And the turn for me came when the show Entourage came around, and they loved The Sopranos and wanted directors. They wanted the humor to be reality based. So I got hired for Entourage. I did
Makes
10 of
sense.
those, got Emmy nominations for it, and then suddenly people, oh, Dan can do comedy. So then that opened that door.
Yeah.
So now I was one of the producer directors on the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia at the very beginning. And I've done, a lot of comedy since. So I'm able to go back and forth. But back to the feature thing, I had got a bit pigeonholed as for horror. And but I said, no, my next film is going to be, it's going to reflect my sensibility. And I was very choosy, and not tons of opportunities came my way. And I always assumed, well, I'm going to write, and the blank page was not my friend. And I wound up just kind of, developing a few things. And as that process was kind of difficult, television came along, and I thought, okay, it'll be a placeholder. It'll be something I could at least learn a little technique. And I just started doing it. I still kept my hand in trying to, find development deals and things like that. And there's, it's called development hell for a reason. You can have a development deal that goes on for years. Television was so great because you'd make a show and it would be on within a few months, and actually more people would see it than see the features. And if it were a great show like Sopranos, then people were talking about it, and it was like a fun exchange.
Yeah. And rewatching it for years to come.
Yeah. Sopranos, though, I worked for a lot of years before Sopranos, and that was when it was, I was really trying to get a feature, but I was honing my craft. And I was finding that, gee, it's really interesting to me, this process of not being able to control, having to accept a lot of given elements. Okay, this is the script, this is the story, this is what you're, have to deal with. It was a little bit like acting, because it was like, as an actor, you come in, you're not, you're hemmed in by a lot of things,
Yeah.
and you can regard that as a limitation or an opportunity, as a way to like, okay, how can I find myself within this role? And I kind of approached directing, as I still do, in the same way. It's like, okay, let me understand everything about this world I'm entering as a director, this particular show. Let me learn its language so I can speak it in my voice. Not just mimic something, but then find
Right.
myself in it.
Just like an actor would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also there's tremendous growth opportunities, because it's like, what can I discover within myself that could help me connect to this material?
Yeah.
So that became the thing I love most. And then also the golden age of television happened. So, and I was right there at the beginning of it, because I did, the Sopranos from the very get-go, because I had met David Chase on Northern Exposure, and he called me to do the first episode after the pilot, which was done like 9 months before they went to series.
Yeah.
And I just found nirvana with that. Unfortunately or fortunately, I had also, before he even offered that, I just accepted a 2-year job as a producer director on a show called Party of Five.
Okay.
And so I couldn't, I got to squeeze in the one episode, and then I was not available for, years, but I did come back and do a few more. But what The Sopranos did, and I talk about it a little bit in the book, is it opened up, is what we all know and love, and what television can be. And I now regard it as like, it's hard for me to even fathom. There are, of course, some great feature films, but it seems like, God, how can they tell a great story in an hour and 45 minutes? I mean, don't you need 20 hours or 50 hours to get all the nuance and everything that these great shows can do? So anyway,
That's true.
yeah.
And because your book subtitle is The New Age,
Inside TV's New Golden Age.
New Golden Age.
Yeah.
Do you mean that by the subscription-based kind of platforms that we see today, or what's your definition of that?
Those are definitely included in it. It's not necessarily the delivery system, even though I think the delivery system kind of makes possible one of these great shows.
Yeah.
But it's kind of shows that are, first of all, generally they're more serialized. It's not like the Law and Order one. This is it. It's like it's a big canvas. It's like a big novel. So so each show is kind of a chapter in it, and the shows being not network, they don't require the most eyeballs. They don't require. It's like they're not dependent on commercial revenue, so they don't have to appeal to the lowest common denominator. They can take chances. They can know, wow, if there's a really smart group out there that's could really appreciate this sophisticated kind of humor or look at something, we're going to make it, because if we can get all of those people, we're a hit.
Yeah.
Or if there's so that's what I think these streaming services and cable services, were able to tap into. But the result was, storytellers, the writers who were the storytellers, could start thinking more creatively, not to be so formulaic. They could give more nuance to their characters. They don't have to be so clear cut. Who's good, who's bad, beginning, middle, and end. It all gets tied up. There's always more nuance, and I think that's what we all love. We kind of want to see, oh my God, watch that happen. So that's one way to think about. I think about the golden age.
Yeah, I love that, because I know I personally get frustrated with sitcom style shows. Like anything with a laugh track, I'm like, I'm probably not going to like this.
Right.
But of course, that was so popular for so long, because that's what appealed to like middle America, quote unquote, and just, the general population.
Right.
And like you said, now it's opened up a world where we can take chances as storytellers, and we can tell so many different kinds of stories that are still going to appeal to a lot of people, but it's going to be different, like specific kind of groups of people. And so that's really awesome.
I think people now can, Yeah, what you described had its place and does still have its place for people who just kind of want to be entertained and sit down with, oh, I know
It's the
Archie
feel
Bunker.
good.
I know,
We want to know,
yeah.
we know the ending. We're
But
just
I
going to
think,
laugh.
right.
And not to say it's bad. It's just not my taste.
Right.
It's not your cup of tea.
Yeah.
I think the newer shows, though, what they offer us all is a chance to recognize ourselves a little bit in it. We can relate it to our own lives. And we can also get vicarious experiences that maybe we're not so eager to have, but we'd like to see what it's like.
So
It's
true.
it's generally more, I want to say reality based, even though there are a lot of shows that are kind of wild and out there. But I bet even those, for the most part, touch on something that's kind of real. That people, I know that. I know that wacky, zany kind of stuff, or I know, they're not, it's not, I think the audiences get more engaged themselves than just gonna get, okay, feed me some more. Oh, let me see that funny bit again. Oh, that's so funny when he says that line that way. You know, that has its limits. Sometimes it's perfect. Sometimes it's what you need.
Yeah.
But
I completely agree. And that's what's so exciting, I think, about having the opportunity to explore television style writing. Episodic is the word I'm looking for like our viewers who are probably more so independent filmmakers. But I think even in thinking of what I want to maybe produce and do, it's just like, don't limit yourself and find, you can still, like, I'm sure we'll all discover our own path like you did. Maybe film producing, it takes such a long time, like you said. And so it's just something to consider, something to explore and write. And like, we have another script that we go back and forth on all the time. Like, should this be a television series or should it be a film? And I don't know, do you have any predictions on how the film movie theater, I hope it doesn't die out. I don't think it will, but I think it's
I don't think
harder.
it will either, because I think the experience is
It's
different.
so,
There's something amazing about sitting in a darkened
Yes.
room with other people and having this communal experience. I don't know. I'd be surprised if it reaches the same level that had been before, because there's so many other opportunities to watch. But I'd say, I mean, I love independent films. I grew up, filmed independent films of the 70s were just, to me, that's what I want to do. That's
Yeah.
I will say that, I find, it's what you bring to each project and I think you can bring a similar spirit of the independent filmmaking to whatever you're working on. I mean, and I don't want to romanticize that too much, because clearly you are limited when you're doing a series. There's a lot of givens you have to kind of accept. But I think it's very possible, particularly with better shows, to have that same sense of, let's really dig deep. Let's really scratch below the surface. Let's find what we care about. And let's not do it the way everybody else did it. It's true that you might have a visual language you have to honor when you come into a show, but I think I certainly feel I'm entering each show really trying to bring a part of myself to the telling and discover a part of myself that can get activated through this story, which is I kind of associate with independent filmmaking also.
Totally.
Yeah.
Is that frustrating then? Because, sometimes you have an experience like The Sopranos was for you that you get to direct the whole way through. And of course, that's like continued work. So that's great. But you actually get to, have or be in charge of the storytelling of that entire
episode. Visiting directors almost never. It's like when the way series television works is somebody is preparing while somebody else is shooting, and then after the shooting, you're editing, and then so that the most you could kind of do would be, although this is breaking down a little bit, but it'd be every third kind of show. So on The Sopranos, I would do, I only did 3 or 4 of them,
Okay.
so one for a couple of seasons. So it's really. Although now, like in some of these miniseries, there is one director. That's a challenge. I've had that experience where I directed, several shows at once on shows I've been a producer. I mean, not at once, but consecutively.
Yeah.
The shows I've been a producer on. But for the most part, what I'm talking about in this book is just taking the one episode you have and making it yours. And even though you have to honor what preceded you, and you have to try to prepare for what's coming next. So you're trying to immerse yourself in the storytelling, but you're really only responsible for that one episode.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's kind of where my question was leading then, because that is usually the norm is you
Yeah.
are just directing an episode here or
Yeah.
there, or a few
Yeah.
episodes.
Right.
Because it seems like it's so much to
For yourself
exactly.
into. So to like step away, like for someone who's tuning in who's like, I'd love to like direct this whole story that
Oh.
I've written and envisioned.
Yeah.
That's probably doesn't
Well,
sound.
that's television is regarded as kind of the showrunner's medium. It's
Right.
like in features, kind of in a certain way, director is kind
Right.
of king or queen. In series television, it's more the showrunner.
Which is what I kind of
Yeah.
learned more reading your book.
Yeah, but
So
what I hope I dispel is the idea that nobody else is creative or the directors don't really do their job.
Mhm.
We all do. And it's like, you
Mhm.
know, you have to serve as the director. You have to serve the vision of the showrunner. However, you know, you can enrich it. You can add to it, you know, so long as you're getting agreement. If you want to make certain changes or take something in what seems to you a more interesting direction, it's a dialogue with the showrunner. They
Yeah.
have to, you know, similar to like if an actor wants to play something a certain way, they'll come to me as the director and
Mhm.
want to explore that. And if I feel, okay, that's serving the
sounds like a
story,
good
do it. Yeah.
choice. Yeah.
It's somewhat similar.
Okay.
But also, you know, it's like the director, unlike the showrunner, is the one who has to make it come alive in the doing of it.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
you as actors know. I mean, it's like it's not the lines. It's not, you know, it's like you have to, you're the one who has to kind of feel, when has life happened?
Yeah.
When
I
has an
love that.
interesting thing happened? You know, it's like you can write all you want about how it's supposed to be.
Mhm.
Right.
The best writing is often very spare, very because the meaning is in the subtext a lot of the time. So, you know, it's like, who is going to be in charge? It's the director and the actors and also it's other departments contribute too, by the way. It's lit and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
But the actual life happening,
Mm.
you know, is not, the writers can't do that. It's the director on set with the actors has to make that. And often, and I detail a couple of examples in the book, often I find, you know, I have to try to discover things that the writers may not have thought about because they have an idea of how something works, but if it doesn't feel to me that it's really working, I have to come up with other ways to
Mhm.
create the feeling they want, to make the story point they want. But it may require an entirely different subtext for the actors or
Right.
or, you know, so.
Yeah. I mean, I think that happens a lot too with writers who only write, who don't actually like produce or, you know,
Direct.
yeah, or they're
Yeah.
not on set with a director or whatever. Is they'll write things that they don't realize are unfilmable or difficult to film, you know? So like that's of course like the like almost technical side of it, but then like you're saying the subtext of that too, it's like sometimes they write
Yeah.
something that is either too obvious and you need to pull back and like have that just be subtext, or it's like what is the subtext behind this? And so just something to think about if you guys are writers and strictly writers is, you
Yeah.
know, think about actually producing these
Well,
things.
also as you're implying, I think stay open
Yeah.
to the input of people. Like if
Absolutely.
a director comes to you and says, this feels overwritten, or actors often will say that, you know, or I'll watch a scene and I'll think, boy, there's just 20% too much dialogue here. I'm not feeling what they want. You know, there's a kind of verbal artistry that, yeah, it kind of reads very great, but it's like, you know, they're saying a little too much. I'm no longer feeling this character is really feeling the feelings they want to feel. Like, why would they
Mhm.
go on after something? You know, there's certain, so the writer has to develop, hopefully, sensitivity in their own writing, but open to the input from people. And when a director comes, and now there's other problems too, like you say, they write things sometimes that can't be done. So part of in my prep period as a director, you know, you'll have 7 or 8 days to prep an episode, and it has
I
to
was
fit.
just gonna ask
It has to fit.
how long
It
do
has
you
to fit
have?
into the budgetary template of like saying, okay, we have 8 days to shoot this episode, and we're budgeted for 12-hour shooting days, so we have 96 hours, and it has to be done, or we're over budget. And
Yeah.
then, you know, the writers can write something, but then during the prep period, there's a whole process of the assistant directors and production manager and director working to kind of hammer out a schedule. And it's like, you can't just say, okay, we'll make it all fit, because you have to do it. Certain quality has to be right. If it's going to take more time, then you have to say, okay, we're going to need some script relief, or we're going to need more time.
Mm.
And then it's kind of you come back to the writers, and the best showrunners are the ones who can accept reality and kind of come up with creative solutions. And the best directors are the ones who can not be so quick to say we can't do something, but try to be imaginative about how perhaps it can be done.
Yeah.
And start to think of creative solutions. That's something that the writers, it's not their area.
Correct.
But the director can think of interesting staging, interesting ways of doing it.
That's why TV terrifies me a little bit because there is such that like quick turnover and solving those problems. But that can be really exciting too.
Great adrenaline rush.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very stressful, but man, when you do it, it's nothing like it.
You're a man who loves to live on the edge, Dan. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah. Do you get how much rehearsal time, if any, sometimes? How does
rehearsal is really an interesting situation, really almost, if there are certain times I'll read a script or it'll be the life of the show, something momentous is happening, a really long scene with, really complicated emotional beats that I will ask, it'd be great if I could rehearse with the actors during my prep, before we get there. That's so rare. It's so rare. Most of the time you get on and, you have about 15 minutes to rehearse a scene. And you know what? Often rehearsal happens as you're shooting.
Yeah.
It's like rehearsal might be the first take.
That makes sense.
But it's not, I'll always have, you have to get the staging, you have to get the blocking, you have to get agreement
that's what
from the
terrifies
actors.
me.
And that has to happen. Yeah, it has to happen very quickly. That's why for me, prep is so critical, because I have to have a staging in mind. I have to fully understand the emotional beats. I have to understand the shape of each scene. What's the key turning point? What's my visual plan for that? So I have to have a staging in mind, but I don't want to be dictatorial. I don't want to come in and say, you stand here, you cross on that line. It's like, that doesn't help the actors embody it. So my process is generally, we get on stage. I'm armed already with a lot of knowledge I have, but I try not to overwhelm the actors. I say, let's just read the lines.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing, because it's like on series television, you're working at such a fast pace and you're shooting out of sequence and all that. So you just, okay, we just finished that scene. Now let's read the lines on this one. They may not, likely aren't aware, wait, where are we in the story? Or it's like, or just learning the lines. It's like they may have just focused on their own lines. And so reading the lines just lets them hear everybody's lines. At least I'm going to hear, okay,
their voice.
you're going to hear that. Yeah. And what that does is it starts to activate the juices without any judgment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what I try to do, is create as safe an environment as possible for the actors to trust themselves, to see what wants to arise. But you have to, again, prepare them so that their choices are coming out of connection to story. You can't just say, okay, let's go to here. What do you want to do? Let's read the line and you cross whenever you want. Well, if they're not into the scene yet, they're going to start doing things just kind of maybe arbitrarily. And then you're going to have to unwind that. No, that's not. Yeah. So I try to get people really to read the lines first. And then I'll say, okay, now let's see what you want to do. And I maybe give them some parameters. Like I'll say, Tessa, why don't you enter from that over there? And, Caroline, why don't you start here? And then, and then where I watch is kind of critical, because without saying this is where the camera is, the actors will kind of tend to want to play it towards me. So they'll just, their own juices will kind of tell them, but I haven't said a word yet about the camera. So hopefully they're finding things, and hopefully they're finding either what I imagined, because I've kind of acted it out in my head, my acting experience, to see what makes sense. If I had this intention, what would I do? Hopefully they'll find something similar or better. Something, oh, I never thought of that. That's genius. They wanted to do that. Great. That's what we're going to do.
That is
but I haven't
smart.
said anything yet.
Still, you're just letting them see their impulses.
And if I find it, but it all has to be done quickly. But if I find there's snags and it's not happening again, how does this make me feel? I'm not paying attention. I'm bored. I gotta, then I'll come in and maybe make suggestions. But this all has to happen, and hopefully I'll get a buy-in, but mainly because I'm appealing always on the basis of the story we're telling and the character's intention. I said, this moment where you really, don't, you're hiding something from her and everything, that might be a good point for you to kind of turn away and go make yourself a cup of tea so you don't have to face her. Just kind of, you don't know what you're going to say next. Maybe that walk over to make the tea would be something motivated, like you're collecting your thoughts. Something that would help the actor embody the intention, which is always what I'm hoping for. I mean, I like when you can turn down the sound on a scene and watch it and kind of understand it just by the behavior. because it's always more interesting, I think. I think performances tend to be better when they're embodied, because the body is such a exquisite organ of expression.
Yeah, you mentioned that in your book.
Yeah.
And would it help a director to maybe, as an exercise, like watch a scene without the audio on and just study the physical movements in it?
Yeah, and just get acquainted with your own. What do I do when I'm this, or
Yeah.
what do I notice? How does a really arrogant person stand? How does a depressed person stand? It's like, your physicality. That's an acting tip too. I mean, it's like how you are physically. Motion can produce emotion. It's like, I've heard it said, it's hard to be depressed if you're smiling. It's like if you make yourself do certain things physically, it has a, So anyway, I try where I can to suggest physical staging and stuff. I love it when an actor finds it themselves. I'll try to make sure the set has opportunities for, sometimes I'll have to figure out in advance, what a physical action might be that also gets the actors off just thinking of the lines. I knew that I found that out in my own acting experience. I loved it when I had something to do. I remember I took an acting class from a great teacher, and I was doing Mercutio's speech. He has a famous speech in Romeo and Juliet where he talks about Queen Mab. He's telling Romeo, "Oh, you're just up in your head." He's like, "Oh, it's like Queen Mab," and he starts talking about this fantasy, this fairy queen, and it's like he's and he says, "It's nothing. It's just fantasy."
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I was doing the lines, and the guy said, "You got anything anything you do physically?" And I said, "Well, I got a basketball in my car, and I could kind of twirl it on my feet. Go get it." And it's like I started just holding the finger, and I was doing the lines, and it was the best performance I gave, because it's like, you're doing something, and you've done the prep work, so it's in you, but then you can forget about it, focus on a physical task, and it tends to come out in a freer, more real way. So those are some
technique. It's not the performance. It's not just like focused on the performance itself anymore.
Right.
And that's what we all just try to embody, just the reality of the situation.
That's why it's so hard, I find, when actors are forced, or sometimes circumstances require that they just sit still and talk. Say if you're at a dinner table or something, and you're just sitting, but it's very hard. It's harder to motivate all of the reactions one wants within a scene, just in your cerebral thinking, okay, now she said that, I'm thinking this, wait, I'm going to make a transition now. If you say, I got to think in my head, what am I thinking about? Oh, now I'm going to come back. As opposed to having it be physical, having there an opportunity.
Maybe that's why dating
away.
can be so awkward.
That's a good, you should go bowling or something on a first
exactly
date.
An activity, guys.
Right.
I know, it's actually, I'll admit to this, because you just reminded me, like when I was studying acting in college, and we learned about body language and the physicality, and I I tested it out on a date once. I was just like, I don't know if I was actually mad at the person, or I just wanted to mess around, because that's what we do as actors sometimes. And I just remember I created a physical barrier in the middle of our conversation. I think I just literally just something simple, like putting my arm down and creating this line, and he felt it. He was like, "Is something wrong?" And I was like, "Ooh, this is cool."
This is why people don't like to date actors.
We're just test the limits sometimes.
And it's so great though, because it's like, if you do have an opportunity to rehearse, I mean, that's great to explore, something like, give the actors something, something that might feel arbitrary, but that feeds into the emotional reality. If you're a character with with defenses or barriers, make the person act. Let's rehearse the scene anyways, see if we can find something with a physical barrier there. It's like you want to get to her, but you can't. What does that do? Now those are kind of wonderful kind of exercises you can do when you're stage rehearsing or you have more time. In series television, you don't really have that kind of time generally, but you do have time to find the beats. And as I say, that's why you generally like to start shooting with the widest shot, the master, because that's not likely to be the one where the heavy emotional beats are going to be. So it's kind of like a way for the actors to get their juices flowing, so that on repeated viewing performances, they're finding more subtlety, they're finding more nuance in what they're doing, and hopefully when you get into the tighter coverage, it's a more compelling performance.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's, at least I know it's frustrating for me as an actor, that it's if you're starting with the wide shot, you have the freedom to move and such a little bit more. if you're going into a close-up, you know, you don't want all that movement. It's a nightmare for the editor kind of thing. But then you also have to remember, okay, what did I do physically? Because it's got to now match in this shot. And like, it's just so many things to think about and process and remember. And meanwhile, you're trying to have your head clear to be able to have
That's
those
why
emotions.
I'm scripty.
Yeah.
Right, I guess, right? Like, because as an actor, it's a lot.
Acting is a tremendously challenging and interesting job. And it's like you've identified one of them. It's like, and I think, you know, most actors do well. I mean, sometimes the physicality can help them match because, you know, they're, but it can also be difficult. It's like if I reach for my tea with my left hand in one take and then the other take I'm going with my right hand, well, it doesn't match. So it really handcuffs the editing. You have to play it all in one shot. You can't intercut where you might want to. But that's a skill. That's something actors really have to, you can really tell I mean, it's so interesting to me. You know, I get on these sets and these good shows and I marvel at how good everybody is. And it's like, you know, even the slightest, you know, thing that someone doesn't do quite well, it kind of, oh, wait, we got to do it again because of that. You know, it's like, you think, wow, I mean, the people who rise to the level of working a lot have really, you know, done a lot of inner work and a lot of practice and all that. Same with actors. I mean, you can, if someone has no awareness of where they're moving in space, they don't know where they did what or how they did it, you know, sometimes they get very fresh performances because they're very just intuitive and impulsive and all that, and it can be great. And then you have to adjust how you shoot it, you know. But you really appreciate it when someone really has a sense, has that. It's so fascinating to me, the acting process. Someone can be so open to their inner channel to what they're discovering at the same time they have another part of their mind which is aware that when they were saying that line, they raised their left hand and kept it just like this. And then they dropped it just like that at that moment.
Yeah.
And they know it. But that's why you have script supervisors. Because they're making notes and all that kind of stuff.
It's such a fun world. I mean, I think acting is I think for both of us, the most enjoyment, and we love it so much. But like we've always said on the show, like learning about what's going on around you too in the production space has made us more aware and better at what we do. On that level, because it's just you then respect what the director is giving you as a note and like, or what the script is saying. And like you said, those who have trained and worked a lot in the industry, they just become aware and like, and it doesn't become as overwhelming then.
Yeah, and the challenge is, as you become more aware of the technical side, never to lose sight of the real gold, which is your truth, how truthful you can be in your own performance and really be with the moments and all that. So it's a complicated thing.
Yeah.
It's all complicated, man. Acting, directing. You gotta love it if you want to do it. That's for sure. God. Thank you so much for coming in today. This was really awesome. I know we learned a lot. I'm inspired. This was a really great interview. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope people will consider my book. It's available on Amazon, and there's a lot of stories. We just scratched the surface today on these. So I think it's a good read.
Oh, fantastic. It's an amazing read. You guys have to read it. We are definitely going to plug it in on our social media, link it, drop it out for you guys, because there's, again, just information for any kind of director who wants to learn the craft more. It's definitely something you can take on any film set or TV set.
Or even if you personally aren't looking to be a director, but you're just curious about it, how the world works, and want to hear stories about it, you know?
Yes. And thank you for also including the feminine pronoun she and her in the beginning of your book. I just immediately felt heard. I don't know. So I know it was so in a subtle way, like it wasn't in your face at all. And I just have to mention that because we are here, Femme Regard, about promoting.
One of the wonderful things that's happened is how many more women directors are now getting work. And I've actually done whatever I can to assist in that.
I love that.
I've mentored several young women who've gotten their shot at directing, and I've actually sometimes assisted by offering my services to be there with them which can assure a producer. So I think it's long overdue.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. That really means a lot to us and to our audience. I know who a lot of female directors. Like we appreciate that so much. So thank you. And thank you for coming again today. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the show. We know we did. And we will see you guys around next time.